The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Today's program brought to you by...
So she didn't inherit Grandpa's jawline, but there's no doubt she's family. It's your job to raise her, and it can be tough. Let's make it easier. With technology and automation, you can do more, like produce high-quality bales with way less effort. Built-in sensors can measure bale moisture and size, so you can monitor quality on the go and manage your fleet from your phone. Sit back and enjoy effortless operation. Discover an easier way to work.
Well, as harvest season rolls along and we get to the midway point of the month of October, how are things looking on the weather front as we look to wrap up harvest and work our way towards the end of the year and really get into the fall stretch here before winter? Let's talk about things. Joining us now, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien Ag Solutions for our weekly weather update. Eric, good to catch up with you. Hope you had a nice weekend, and let's start there. What did we see over the weekend? What have been some features you've been watching the last several days across the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a nor'easter, our first nor'easter, and we always wonder if that's going to be kind of a harbinger of things to come. Like there was a good storm system to roll up the East Coast. It's too warm, of course, to make snow, but there was snow. We had snow in the Western Mountains. We had snow in Canadian Prairie after a deep low went into the Northwest. In the Southwest, we had the remnants of Raymond and Priscilla that caused major flooding in parts like Arizona, for example. And then we had another cold front come through the Midwest where the temperatures behind it this morning created frost and freeze issues in parts of the Dakotas. Temperatures are, 10, 20 degrees cooler behind that front. So it finally feels like something is breaking away from where we've been for so long, which has just been a stagnant pattern with more north-south flow than west to east. And I think that's going to signal a couple of things. If I'm a Midwestern farmer, I'm going to get on my horse and get things done, because if the pattern starts to develop more of these types of features, we're going to see more precipitation, meaning harvest windows are going to tighten up a little bit. That's common. I mean, that's nothing. No one listening is going like, well, I haven't seen that before. Yeah, no, that's common. But we've seen such wide open harvest windows. And it's interesting. I was talking to a guy at church the other day. He says, I can't believe I'm done harvesting. Because usually I have to wait till after my wife's birthday. I said, well, when's her birthday? She's like, it's in a week and a half from now. Like, we're still cutting corn or beans at that point. He says, but we're just done because of how dry and warm it's been. So I think we're going to start to see some of those windows tighten up, and it might mean just a little different look for the second half of this month.
Well, and let's talk about that, because it has been, somewhat of an abnormal harvest season, just with it being so warm and so dry in many areas. We've seen, drought issues because of it in certain pockets and things of that nature. But to your point, there's a lot of folks who are getting done earlier. They've had that opportunity, but now it's starting to sound like, as we kind of look ahead to fall, things are going to start to maybe get more normal, I guess, if I could put it that way. Eric, what do you say to that?
Yeah, normal is chaos in fall, right? I mean, it's a transitional season, so to be normal means a lot of ups and downs. But here's the long story short. Since August 1st, when the Bermuda High exited east and went over toward Africa, the drought monitor increased in area by 30%. We have seen just big blocking ridges, no good zonal flow. Zonal means west to east. And finally, last week, we saw something to spark this going forward. And what it was is a big dome of high pressure built into Siberia. Now you're going, well, why does that even matter? Well, they've had extra snow under that cold dome of high pressure. They have then seen a wind that's anomalously been out of the east, pushing up against the Himalayan mountains. And what this often results in is the atmosphere overcompensating and then just sending this massive jet of stronger winds aloft across the Pacific Ocean to break this all apart. And that is the change we're expecting to see later on in the month of October that could really just usher in a much, much different weather pattern, more frequent low pressure systems, a return of Gulf moisture, snow in the Rocky Mountains, onshore flow in the west, and then systems that can roll up the East Coast, which is more typical of fall weather. Now, we're still waiting on all that to happen. In the meantime, there are a couple systems to watch. I'm curious about this upcoming Saturday, especially for where you are. There is a storm system that's going to finally bring in flow from the southwest aloft, which means we have a chance of getting some severe weather in the Mid-South. Now, it's 6 days away, but we're going to keep watching it to see if the pattern continues to unfold in that direction, but I think it will. Temperature-wise, the Midwest, the central part of the U.S. is going to skyrocket in temperatures again, but it's going to be punctuated by fronts that come through, the next one coming through this weekend. And speaking of this weekend, I actually think this might be the beginning of the pattern breakdown. There's like a legitimate chance of widespread rain through the whole of the Midwest, hitting some of the driest climate reporting districts that have been so dry for the last 2.5 months. Now, will this bring the Mississippi River up fast? No, it'll recover, but it won't just, shoot back up to well above average levels for a while. It's going to take some time to get that done. But, based on what I'm trying to tell you is there's something different happening, and I'm excited to see just a change.
Well, and I think about this too, just longer range into winter and more. And you mentioned the severe weather chances and things of that nature. As we get pattern changes,
Yeah.
I know this is something we've touched on before. With all the drought issues we've had build, having a messy winter, it's not something folks want to hear, but it could be very beneficial for next spring, Eric.
Yeah, I want to hear it because I've said this same phrase 1,000 times. I really don't care what everybody thinks about me during the winter. And what I mean by that is if we forecast terrible winter weather, so be it. I mean, I understand it's rough, but
Yeah.
good, bad winters, I guess I should say. So the bad winters give us great springs and summers. And so what I'm worried about right now, Jesse, is what's that drought monitor going to look like on April? April 1, for example. It's got to be less in order for me to not worry about drought next year. So I need a good hard winter. And some of the new models, they're a little bit, they're thinking winter's going to come on late. So like January, February, March, not the like early November, December type winters we can get. That doesn't mean you won't see cold weather. That doesn't mean you won't see snow during the late fall time period. I'm just saying that it's expected to be much more vigorous into the second half of winter. We are still monitoring a La Nina, but we're expecting this La Nina to peak probably at or before Christmas and maybe quickly exiting by the time we get to February and March, be back to INSO neutral conditions. And that gives us a better chance of getting the jet stream to attack the United States from two different perspectives, a polar jet and a subtropical jet, which is what you'd need to just completely wipe out that drought monitor. So yeah. And by the way, I failed to mention this. We're not done with the hurricane season yet. I mean, don't forget, right? Lorenzo's out there spinning. It's going to stay out to open ocean. But a lot of us meteorologists are noticing this next wave coming across the Atlantic that may sneak into the Caribbean. Now, so far this year, there have been no storm systems at all in the Gulf. I can't rule out just yet that, 8, 9, 10 days from now, something could sneak into the Caribbean and get into the Gulf and possibly revive the drought situation in the Delta or maybe into Texas, where they are desperate to get moisture at this point. So I'd say there's a lot of things to be monitoring, but there's near-term threats, and then you just heard me kind of recount the longer term.
How about South America? What's the latest update there, Eric, as we look to close out the show this week?
Yeah, man, I was wrong on the planting progress report from Friday. I thought that they were going to stay at the top end of that 5-year distribution. I mean, they were the planting pace was record a week ago. Then I was like, yep, they're going to go. It was drier, so they'd have more windows, but they all pulled back. They were like, I'm not going to plant into this. There's germination problems with this drier weather. And I guess they didn't. And so now, we're still 4% above the 5-year average, but I was expecting them to be like 12 to 15% above that, and they weren't. So I'm talking mainly about Mato Grosso. So going forward, we have better rains attempting to get into the Cerrado, the main part of Brazil's growing area, over the next 10 days. But most models are now saying, week 2 is drier. And that means that the monsoon's not fully established just yet. And we have to be aware that they could, they could see mid to late planting season delays that need to be watched carefully. That's huge for our markets. And they started off aggressive, but I think there's going to be a pullback.
Any other final thoughts you'd have for us this week, Eric?
I would just say bigger picture. There's going to be a lot of folks talking about La Nina for winter. This La Nina is pretty weak, and it's going to have its own flavor. So we need to make sure that we don't just settle into the typical, hey, this is what La Ninas do type narrative. I think this winter has got a lot on its shoulders in terms of reducing drought area across the country. And I would really like to see if it can actually produce some snow across the northern tier of the country, which we've not seen for a few winters now. So that would be the big thing I'm going to watch as we go forward.
All right, folks can go to agweather.com, ag-wx.com for more. Eric Stongrass, Nutrient Ag Solutions. Thanks again for joining us this week, my friend. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you again next Monday.
Yeah, sounds good. See you, Jesse.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.